Good evening and a warm welcome to AHSS Presents. And this evening we've got a talk with Max, and I just wanted to remind everybody that we are recording this. So if you don't want to appear, then you should turn your cameras off. If you do, it's fine, but we are recording. And so the way that we're going to plan this is that Max will talk for a little while, and then we'll take questions after that. I've got some questions of my own to ask him. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and then I'll pick some of the questions out at the end and ask Matt for you. And I think that's about all from me. So I'm just going to pass it over to Max. Welcome, Max.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate you all being here. I always enjoy talking about art and the things that matter most to me. And so I guess the first question is like, what do I do? Which is a question that I get quite a lot being in New York, where everybody is very business minded. Often the very first question that you meet somebody, they're like, hi, what do you do? And that's a complicated question, because I think you're asking to get a general sense of my power and income. And besides the fact that my answer won't give you one, that seems like a pretty dumb basis on which to judge someone. See, I'm a poet. And that might be confusing if you were expecting a more traditional answer, like I'm a freelancer, doctor, investment banker. But what's frustrating is that those people aren't their jobs either. And look, maybe you're just making small talk. You asked one question after all, and after all this jabbering off, you'll probably need a Tylenol. I'm ready for your follow-up. Oh, like you make money as a poet? Sometimes, not all the time. It's not like every time you hear me rhyme, I'm making another couple dimes, but I'm doing fine. It's just something that I am. And you might have preconceived notions of struggling artists and depressing poets, but I happen not to fall into either of those categories. So you see, I have as many problems with the poet label as it has with me. But I've done some thinking on it, and I'm not sure there's a better word for it. I guess I could say I serve eloquent messaging tonics. I spit impeccable rhythm and got an ear for the phonics. You know, Earth, this is like a big part of the reason I'm on it. And humanity's suffering is endlessly chronic, and my words help you tap into a deeper subconscious and figure out how to release your shit from it like a sonic colonic. Yeah, I guess I'm a sonic colonic. Or I could say I make complex concepts a little less convex. I make people who move too fast stop and reflect. I'll put you inside the head of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, looking up at the first meteor shower, perplexed how these beautiful, dangerous speeding objects could have such complete and utter disrespect for his total territorial dominance, when just moments ago he was at the apex having more T-Rex sex than you'd ever expect. I guess I could say I'm a man who injects your mind with the perspective of a T-Rex who just figured out that we're all tiny specks. What do you do? And so that was something that I wrote out of frustration with that question, because I really have always had a lot of trouble just like fitting into the boxes. And this poetry thing is something that really just like kind of happened to me. I heard a poet perform in a friend's living room, and just something landed, something resonated inside of me. And I found myself remembering the words much more than I thought that I would. And on the way home, I just started writing about why, like what was going on, trying to figure out what was happening inside of me. And so much of the writing that I've done really has come from just like trying to figure out what the heck is happening inside of me or in the world. And the first two lines of what I wrote, they rhymed. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And I finished that poem, and from there it started to move. And I'll get a little bit into that and share my screen. Optimize, beautiful. So yeah, once I started writing these, I would perform them for friends. I had friends who were throwing some events, and they would invite me to share at these events, and I would do like one-off poems at events, and that started feeling really good. And like initially that was not something I was getting paid for, which is something that I liked doing. And then, you know, every now and then a corporation would want to hire me to do that. And that was cool. It started to look like maybe a business could be forming out of the art. But what was most powerful for me was like, I was just sort of wondering, could I create my own container? Like, could I do this myself? And I put together like a show, a collection of like 9 poems that I perform on stage, really planned it out very carefully, sort of like a stand-up comedy show, but mixed in with poetry and comedy. And I like gathered a bunch of friends and I performed it, and it was really well received. And it really, it was a co-working space. There was nothing very official about it at all. And I just it was something that very clearly was striking a chord with people. People were leaving spiritually fed. And also for the first time for me, it just felt like like, what am I doing? What is my artistic expression? It's this. It's gathering people in a room. It's this being able to talk about the things that I care about in this very unique and interesting way, and doing that for an hour. And I started doing that. And then there was someone who worked at a theater who was there in that room. And so they said, like, do you want to put this on and do a real show in a theater? And I thought, oh my God, yeah, of course, I'll do that. And I, like, it was at Cherry Lane, and I went and did that. And then, like, tried to message everybody that I knew and be like, do you want to come see this thing? Just sort of guerrilla marketing it. But word of mouth was spreading. I was onto something good here, and it happened again and again and again. It started selling out. I went to California. I did 2 shows in California, did 11 shows over the course of the year. All of them sold out, and it was all word of mouth. And it was really beautiful. I got to do it at Joe's Pub, which is like a very big, like the Public Theater was a very prestigious one in New York. And that was really a highlight for me. And yeah, something was striking a chord. And like, I knew, like, I had been doing this for a while, but it never felt like it was taking shape. Like, I'd seen where my direction was going as an artist. And these shows, these live shows, were definitely the first time that just felt true and right. And then I can no longer click. But also what I want to share is that, like, it all makes sense looking back. And I think this is true with a lot of our stories, but in the moment, like, while it's happening, I almost always feel like I have absolutely no idea, like, what I'm doing or what the next step is or what the right next thing is to do. It's very easy to draw these stories looking back on our lives and on our careers and being like, this led to this, led to this. But the truth is, every single one of these shows that sold out, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. There's no way that people are going to, like, still come to this thing. Like, I don't know, how do I do this? It was just a constant hustle and grind. And that happened every time, all the way up to COVID. And I also want to share is that, in the sense of not knowing what I was doing, this was me of, like, right when I was in school, and, like, I was this douchey guy with a Google Glass being in the tech world. And something that also makes sense looking back, but did not make sense going forward, was, like, I had this interest in technology. I like, when I was in college, the first job I had was, they're like, you're young, go figure out social media. And I was like, okay, started doing social media for brands. That led into this whole other side of career for me. And then I fell in love with startup world, had a friend who was starting a social media startup. I thought, okay, maybe I can help with social media. And in doing so, started to realize that so much of the game of social media was really about, how do we grab and hold as much attention as possible? And our investors said, if we could hold your attention for 2 minutes or longer, we had a valuable company. I like to say sometimes, we ever looked down at your phone or computer and then immediately gotten distracted and forgotten your job and forgotten why. And that was my job, was to take you out of your world and bring you into mine. And I started to realize that as architects of our digital world, we need to do better. But I'll let him say it, because he says it better than me.
Architects of our digital world. Stop. Be better. Because we can be. And we can see that these systems have been designed with intricacy, so that companies can keep our attention indefinitely. I don't want to keep crushing these freaking candies. I don't want these alerts to completely command me. I don't care if that panda bear is dancing. Well, maybe. With a hula hoop. Okay, this is fantastic. I have to share this with my 10 friends and 10,000 strangers. Caption, who wants to throw a panda rager? Great, let me go back about my life. For God's sakes, I'm trying to right swipe my wife. Huh. 30 seconds and just 2 Facebook likes. Or is that just 2 for which I've been notified? Let me go back and check inside and see whose likes I tried to hide. They don't show them all, I wonder why. This panda's dancing. And another video plays after automatically. This one of a gopher that stage turns dramatically. It's like my attention is kept systematically raptured by algorithms that know exactly what I want. Or not what I want, just what I'll watch. And the people behind this intelligent design genuinely want to better our lives. But their bonuses just so happen to be tied to keeping time on site exceptionally high. And now even my news apps have been gamified, and what am I, not gonna click that one simple sex tip guaranteed to blow her mind? Wait, where was I, and why have I forgotten to look for that thing I'm supposed to find? And my God, look at the time. It is shocking. But somehow, yes, Netflix, I am still watching. And I know. I should have more self-control. But just to be clear, you just spent $1 million telling me this story designed to cut off at the end, leaving me wanting more. See, of course I want to see what you have in store. See my cursor already waiting there on the screen floor as you tease the next hour in all of its glory. And you'll give it to me, unless I actively abort. See, it seems the decision's already made for me. The countdown clock's moving. There it goes. 5, 4, 3. I need to sleep. But you made me want this more. This is not what I consciously signed up for when I hit play on one episode 6 hours ago. Architects of our digital world, you have more data, information, and control over our attention, the tools to tweak our emotions so we'll return to your experience. But is that what you should do? Or should you build digital tools so advanced they can actually enhance the world outside the device in our hands? Can you add so much value that it lets us put our phones back in our pants as fast as we possibly can? Not time-sucking, time-giving innovation. That's what it means to be truly technologically advanced. The future is not all screens. It's humanity enhanced.
So I've turned a bunch of these poems into short films. And they've been really well received online. And for me, so much of what it's about, and like this was by far the most convergence of the two worlds that I've been a part of, as I'd met this guy, Tristan, who was talking really beautifully about the way technology was influencing humanity and inspired that poem. And I thought, can I help raise awareness for this movement, which has now gained a lot of steam and become the Center for Humane Technology, which you might have seen in The Social Dilemma. But for me, like so much of art for me and storytelling has been about delivery. Can I get the message to land with you? Even like through the screen, talking into the screen, I feel like it doesn't quite happen. I feel like through the screen, it is very hard to get a message to actually land. On stage, in person, I can feel it. I can feel that actual connection, that delivery of the spirit of it land. And so I go through such great, tremendous lengths to turn these poems into short films that continue and grab the attention and the eye, because it's so important to me that the message land. And it's like, again, looking back, it makes way more sense than going forward. In the moment, I went on Vimeo. I was like just trying to find who are really talented videographers. I had no idea how to make a video at all. And just like who tells stories in ways that I really like, message them. Like I called up this guy, like I found his number, I called him up. I lied, to be honest. I was like, I'm from the Discovery Channel and we're doing a thing and I'm trying to blah, blah, blah. And I was so vague. He finally gets on the phone. He's like, what is, like, that was his assistant. He goes, what is that? What are you doing? What is this? And I was like, hey, none of that is true. Can I just do a poem for you? And he was like, you want what? Okay. And then I performed a different poem, Subway Love, a little thumbnail on the right there. And no idea if he had hung up on me in the middle. I was just like hoping, I was like, I really want to make this into a video. Is there any way you'll do this with me? And it worked out. The cards were in my favor on that. And then after that went viral and got a lot of attention. It was easier to make others, and that was the path moving forward. And so yeah, all these videos, I'm really proud that they both have been seen millions of times and also like win film festivals. I think not a lot of things bridge both gaps of being sort of like artistically recognized and appreciated and holding their integrity and also being seen by lots of people. It's a really hard thing to do on the internet, and I'm really proud of that. This is also, so I'm now during COVID, to be honest, like because it always feels like I have no idea what I'm doing. At the end of these shows, I was like, I don't know, am I able to keep selling these out, to keep like performing these, to keep doing this? And then COVID happened and it was shutting things down anyway. And so we were able to use King's Theater in Brooklyn, which is this ridiculous theater that we never would have been able to afford or get if it was not like everything shut down. But they let us shoot in this empty theater. And one of the actors in it took a shirtless picture in the middle of the theater that I thought was very funny there on the right. But this is the first time that I'm like taking the whole show, 9 pieces together and trying to do that thing, trying to deliver that essence and pass it through the screen. And so we're in the edit on that. I'll be pitching it to the Netflix's, Hulu's, Amazons of the world soon. And Again, no idea what I'm doing. We'll see where that goes, see if that turns into something, but I'm very hopeful that it will. I think it's really unique and special, and that it's going to be an exciting new sort of genre, I hope. And so some of you might have seen The Social Dilemma. Speaking of Netflix and the mainstream, this has been an awesome artifact to help spread awareness of the way technology is influencing humanity. My role with this film, with this organization, has really been for a while. I was just like helping however I could. And in the career path, that was I was looking at it was, I believe in this. How can I help? How can I be valuable? And making that short film I showed you was one of the ways that I was sort of most initially involved. And then just by nature of being around the topic, I ended up learning quite a lot about it. And we would get all these messages from parents and teachers and students, like, what the heck do we do about social media in this digital age? Like, how do we navigate this? And so I started giving talks to students, thought maybe my perspective about how the stuff is designed can be helpful. And so I spend a bunch of my time doing that. As an artist, like, I'm a big fan. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this. Really highly suggest like having a thing that takes the pressure off of your art to be the thing that makes you all the money. Like, I think is so helpful. Like, I'm so grateful to the Center for Humane Technology and to this line of work that allows me to like have other income stream that doesn't make me constantly have to think, how can my art make money? How can my art make money? Because of course, it's not why we do it. It's not why we make art. It's not why we create. It's not about the money. And it really is a stress relief that I'm so grateful for, to have another stream of income that allows my art to be my art without pressure. And so I think this video sums up what I do in schools pretty well. I'll just give like a little taste of that, and then want to open things up to questions. But so I'm mostly talking to students about this.
Hands, give me whole hands if you have Snapchat. If you use Snapchat, give me your whole hands, please. Keep your hands high if you have some kind of streak going, any streaks going. Keep your hands high if you like streaks. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it wild that so many of us are doing something that we don't actually like doing? And by this point in the presentation, you can probably guess that the people at Snapchat are not waking up in the morning and saying, how can I create the most meaningful friendships and relationships between teenagers today? Streaks are a really powerful tool at getting us to come back and use the app every day. But something strange starts to happen, right? It starts to feel like, ooh, if I don't have streaks going with this person, are we really friends? Or like, ooh, if I don't have streaks with enough people or the right people, am I popular? Am I socially doing okay in school? It starts to feel like it has this very real impact on our lives, even though it was created by people who look like me in California and has nothing to do with our actual friendships. But it starts to feel very, very real. I have a friend who works at a psychiatric hospital, and she talks about how when teenagers are checking in, they are terrified to give their phones away because they cannot end their streaks. It would be the end of the world for them to end their streaks. And WhatsApp is just as easy to send messages back and forth. We don't need to be entering into these environments, but it starts to feel like a very real measure of our friendships, and probably shouldn't. And actually, quickly, give me a show of hands. Have you ever taken a picture of a wall or something ridiculous just to keep a streak going? Please, give me honesty. Give me honesty. What are we doing? What are we doing here? What are we doing?
So a lot of the reasons that I do this work is, this convergence, especially with tech, is because I don't want to live on the Wall-E ship. And that is pretty much where it seems like we're headed with a lot of this technology. And as I look at the future of technology, I see things like virtual reality coming into play, which can be incredible, giving people regaining use of their limbs, getting over phobias. There's magic that can come. A lot of artistic expression, creativity can be done with these technologies. But also, I feel like if it's designed in the same way social media is, that we're really headed in a not so good direction. And an example of that for me, which is a story I'll leave you with before opening up, was I went to Disney World as an adult, which is not an experience that I recommend. And there was one exhibit where you go into the Disney movies that I loved as a kid growing up, and you have virtual reality headset on. And so you're very visually immersed, and you have headphones on, so the audio feels real. And there's one moment where you dive into the Little Mermaid and they drop water from the ceiling. And I felt like I saw the future at Disney World, and it wasn't real, or not real like I know real. Not real like we've defined real, but I dove into the virtual sea and I felt the water splash across my face. I heard the ocean in my ears. I saw a mermaid singing right in front of me, and I could touch, well, right through her. Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? And I can't be the only one to see the irony that she wants to be. Where the people are. She wants to see them dancing. But as a representative sample of supposed to be dancers. We're fine, thank you. Content here in our minds, thank you. Let's turn reality to channel 259, thank you. Walking around on those. What are they called again? Who remembers? We never use them anymore. Scene change to behind Aladdin and Jasmine on their magic carpet ride. And as I marvel at this new fantastic point of view, I realize love could live here too. I could build a whole new world with you, adventure with you, fly through skies of green and trees of blue. This shining, shimmering, splendid gift is now available for just $19.99 when Squarespace meets Oculus Rift. Scene change to the African plains to where Simba and Nala are playfully playing. So close that I'm literally part of their game, but I can't quite feel the wrestling. Not yet. But give it time, we're still developing. We'll make simulation much more like the real thing. You'll have complete control over everything because we just can't wait to be king. We just can't wait to rule over the worlds we create rather than participate in the one we share. And we'll be able to build our own world soon. Let's have tea in Morocco this afternoon. And this evening, I'll build you a palace on the moon. We'll sip soup on silver spoons. And for dessert, we'll have gravity removed. We'll float through the cosmos with oxygen tubes. I'll rejigger the physics on Mars and Neptune to make them more suitable for you. Our minds' worlds, they have different rules. No longer bound by atmosphere. Nature's limitations wiped clear. You can just turn people on and off in here. So by reality channel 8,365, my world's only touched by those I decide. I'm completely immersed in the confines of my own mind, opposing ideas left swiped aside. But maybe eventually we'll come to find that we needed each other this whole damn time. Maybe this world we're the tiniest piece of has a system of balance we would never dream of, pushing us somewhere we won't consciously scheme up. Maybe we shouldn't have so much power. Maybe going forwards is backwards. Maybe we should go lie in the grass and make love without glasses, even if it only stimulates orgasm classic. I want to be where the people are. Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun, wandering free. Wish I could be part of that world. Thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Max. So much to unpick. So much to unpick. So I would like to encourage anyone else attending, if you have questions for Max, they can be about anything you like, really. His practice, what all this means, where are we going, what can we do about it, anything at all. Please just put something in the chat and I will pass those messages on in a moment. But I do have some of my own, and I guess I guess this question is really around how optimistic are you? So it's really about, do you think organizations like the Humane Technology people are going to make a difference? What do you really think the future of the technology will be? Are we going to end up with this kind of commerce-driven society with a no get out of jail free card?
I mean, I do tend to be an optimist in general. I believe in humanity and I trust the universe. That said, I think things probably get worse before they get better. I think it's like I would love to live in a world where a social network is designed to enhance our social lives. What would it look like if they were using all of that data to create a world where they were helping us find new experiences and people that like we later rate as being meaningful or really helpful to our lives? There is so much opportunity in front of our noses all the time. What could it be like for this device to actually be like the greatest personal assistant of all time, thinking about our values, thinking about our actual lives as opposed to our screen time and the consequences of that? And so I hope we can build that. Like it's on people. It's on us to actually do that and change it. It's going to be very difficult for the Facebooks and Instagrams and Snapchats and TikTok to change when the business model is so predicated on time and attention. But I think a lot of what the business of the Center for Humane Technology is changing culture. And like from when I started doing this in 2014-ish, huge strides, the social dilemma being an incredible example of that, just the general awareness of what this invisible thing of technology and social media and social coordination is doing to us, we're all much more aware of it, which is at least one step. And I think it's an ongoing fight because, you know, knowing it doesn't make it not have an impact on you. And so I am hopeful that we can build a better future. I want one. I think nobody would choose the thing that we have now in terms of what it does to information, what it does to truth, what it does to self-image, what it does to teenage mental health. No one would pick that. And so I think as we do think about what the next wave of it looks like, I'm hopeful that we can do a better job.
Yeah, well, I'm hopeful as well. I hope we can. And I think that, you know, it's the artists and designers that will, I keep thinking about Marshall McLuhan and talking about, you know, it's the artists and designers, it's those people that can make the difference with technology. And
Yeah, I really do believe, honestly, my biggest regret with that video I showed you is that like we didn't do better at the end. This little flower coordination thing of trying to illustrate what could a world of total social coordination look like to help people with things. But like, yeah, I think it is on artists to paint a better picture of what does that future look like? Like, what is the world that we want to live in? Because it's hard to imagine. It's hard to, it's we artists are so good at breaking free from that and painting better pictures of the future. And we see plenty of dystopia media, but we don't have much utopia media. And I think I'd love to see more.
Yeah, it'd be great to see a bit more visioning about what it could be, what it, you know, rather, because it's really easy for us to say it's terrible and it's eating our lives. So what else then? What else then? I guess that's the question, isn't it? There's some stuff coming in, so I'll have a quick. So this is for Emily, from Emily Godden, and she's asking, how can we hold social media developers, conglomerates, influencers accountable for their impact and influence?
So that's something the Center for Humane Technology works on. My focus personally is more in schools, but that, like, if you go to the that website, which I can put in the chat here as well, there are ways of getting involved in that regard. They're like, the mental model of it is pretty much like hitting them in the wallet is one way. With advertisers, there's a regulatory angle, and there's also a cultural angle of like where we demand it, where we demand better technology and something different. I personally think it takes all of it, and it's a slow and long fight. But let me put that website in the chat.
Yeah, I think there is something that we're kind of slightly sleeping at the wheel here. You know, there was a news article in the UK a couple of days ago about teenage boys' access to porn. It's not regulated here at all, really. I mean, there's no unless you've got parental locks and you check those regularly and you make sure your kids can't unpick your lock. But you know, the
kids are going to be better at undoing it than
exactly. So there's a huge sleeping at the wheel phenomenon around, that's for sure. Okay, so another one. This is from Jill Fraser, who's asking, I'm interested to know what Max thinks about the impact of social media on our understanding of news and how that can be manipulated. How do we trust the sources we access?
Yeah, it's a mess. And it's like, I wish I had a clear, you go here and this is how you get reliable information. But I think the truth is it's very easy for us to look at the people we don't like or don't agree with and say, they are getting so messed up by all the misinformation. All those people who don't agree with me, they're getting so messed up by all the misinformation while I'm perfect and great and right. And I think the harder reality here is that this is all of us, like that we are all being influenced by this system, and the nature of this system in terms of information is it pushes us towards the more extreme versions of whatever we're likely to believe. So there's a researcher named Zeynep Tufekci who, like back in 2015, she was researching a Donald Trump rally. She would watch a Donald Trump video and then be pushed towards like more and more extreme white supremacy stuff and Nazi stuff. She'd watch a Bernie Sanders video. She'd be pushed towards the conspiracy left of chemtrails and all of that. But it's not just politics. She'd watch a vegetarian video. She'd be pushed towards veganism and then how you shouldn't eat honey products because those come from bees. And just the nature of what these algorithms do to us is they push us towards more and more extreme versions of whatever our brains are already likely to believe. And the hardest thing to do is to recognize this is not just happening to them, it's happening to me. Like, this is happening to me. How am I being influenced by this system? And unfortunately, even if we don't get our news from social media, the people who are creating TV news and online news, like, they're deep in these systems, and so their worlds are getting pushed slowly and slowly. Or if you just talk to your friends are probably getting pushed slowly and slowly. So it's very difficult to escape this whole network of that world. And so like I think that seems to me, that's my read on where things are at in this moment, which is a very hard place for it to be. And like how do we trust the sources that we access? Like I think it's like with a grain of salt. And I think we're at a place too where it's like, can we have love and compassion for each other when we live in totally different realities? That seems to be the place that we're headed. Like I used to be much more on like, how do we align everybody's sense of the world to not lose it? Like, I think it's gone. Like for now, I think we are in different pockets of reality. And how do we coexist in that way? It feels like the challenge that we're faced with now.
Yeah, that's. I was thinking when you were talking about I guess another question is about the pandemic and the impact the pandemic has had on, well, I mean, a massive increase on screen time that the pandemic has had, but also I've also seen, I mean, I'm British centric because that's where I live, but I've also seen the sense of community and caring, and we all went out and clapped for the NHS as a community every week at a given time. The entire country went outside their front doors and clapped, and that's a thing to do in the physical world. So it's really weird because it's a kind of dichotomy between this kind of, this kind of dystopic future or dystopic kind of environment that we might be creating, and yet the pandemic has meant that we've functioned in a much more communal way, or to some extent. I mean, don't take either thing to the extreme in what I'm saying, but just wondering what you thought about what influence the pandemic has had on this, because we definitely, everyone's watching box sets on Netflix and checking their phones. My phone use time just went through the ceiling, just falling.
And how, in some ways, what a blessing, right? Technology has been to be able to communicate with each other. What a gift. It would have been really very, very different if this was a different era when we had this pandemic. And then also, I do think in terms of news and our sense of what is happening in the world, so much more of that obviously is going to be taken in from screen time than from accessing it during a pandemic. And yeah, I'm here in New York. People would clap out the window for healthcare workers. Like that was a beautiful coming together. And I think often we have a human tendency to really want to categorize things as good or bad, when of course it's so often like it's all of it. It is. There is both. There is helpful. There is harmful. Like it's all coexisting together. In the work that I do in schools, definitely schools have been really struggling with online learning, just like Zoom fatigue and it just being a really draining process for teachers, for students, for everybody, and it being a really hard time for parents. But also I think it's in its own way, it's also raised more awareness about this. There's no ignoring it, right? Like you can't ignore how deeply and intensely screens are impacting our lives now, which naturally raises more awareness. So it certainly has, I think we've all been on our screens significantly more since the pandemic. In some ways, wow, look how much work can be done, and in what ways are they really helpful? I hope that we all can kind of take stock in what felt good. What were the good ways of engaging on this thing that I really liked? And then, wow, this is sure not the same as meeting in person. Like I really missed that. I want to double down on my in-person time that I wasn't getting out of this. And so I hope we can take that from it. But yeah, it's a big question, a lot of angles.
It is. I was thinking, I just wanted to go back a little bit about this kind of like what's truth, what's post-truth, what's real, what's not real. And as I was thinking that in some ways there is no truth to be had. I mean, you can go back to Socrates to find that out. So that's interesting. So maybe this is kind of, we're waking up from this kind of sleeping thing of believing everything we've been told. The government has told us, history's told us, it's written in books, that must be true. We've been receiving this. So if we didn't polarize it into just believing nonsense, then we're left what? We're left in this sense of kind of wonder of what is our truth and the value of truth and all those things. There could be that the whole of humanity gets moved forward into this kind of other way of understanding, the more I know, the more I don't know. And that could be a state of wonder, perhaps.
I mean, that's I think a state as artists in the room that we love, right? Is that state of total wonderment and I'm releasing all assumptions and just what is here, what is real, what is in front of me. Yeah, I like the way you phrased that, and I agree that it's like the challenge is we go from that place to latching on to, in some ways, the things that we're most vulnerable to believing, like whether it's cult-like communities, whether like just like things that kind of prey on that openness. Especially in our digital world. The problem is not releasing and opening and doubting and like looking around to find our own truth. That's so beautiful. Finding our own truth, expressing that truth in the world is so beautiful. I agree with your phrasing that the challenge is where we come back to from that place. And then like it's very easy to just latch on to, honestly, to lose our own truth very quickly in the guise of following it. And I think it's a very difficult human challenge that I don't know how we face or fix, but it's I hope we can experience the beauty of, wow, like what is real, what is true for me, and then just hold on to that as we experience it in today's world.
Thank you. So another slightly different angle coming in from David J, who's saying, first of all, thanks for a great talk, Max. I wanted to ask you about your poetry. Do you see yourself in a poetic tradition leading on from past poets?
I really like, at first I was very avoidant of like going like poetry. I stumbled upon poetry, and I grew up loving Dr. Seuss and Shel Silverstein, if that counts, which I think it does. But I then was very afraid of losing my own voice and style if I were to like read too much of past. And then I more recently started reading anthologies of poets and trying to play with different styles in that way. But honestly, like I see myself as a communicator and a storyteller, and poet is like the closest word to what I'm doing that seems to fit. But I think there are far more poets who beautifully come from the traditions, look at the structures and of what poetry really is. To me, like if you want it to be a poem, it's a poem. If you read it like it's a poem, it's a poem, is sort of my attitude, which certainly the more traditional poets would not agree with that statement. So my work has been more influenced, I'd say, by story and communicating and just like expression. And I think less with the structure of traditional poetry, which of course to each their own, but that's been my past.
I had some other questions actually that's just reminded me. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, can you talk a bit about your process as an artist, like how there's something kind of trigger you and that's how you start your ideas, and how do you develop your ideas?
I would say my favorite, like, art has really made me believe in God in a different way. My favorite things that come feel like they're happening. I'm catching something and trying to share it. And it's really confusing for me to figure out how to spend my time as an artist when it feels like by far the most like fruitful and wonderful and inspired things feel like I'm not in control of them. And then, so, okay, so what do I do with my time that I am in control over? And so what I try to vow to do is that like, when those things do happen, I honor them. I will stop what I'm doing and I will write. When something that feels like it's come through from that place that I feel inspired to put forward, I will give myself to that. And then I will think, okay, how can I honor this piece that's come through the best that I can? And then I've found some practices like conversations with certain people really help inspire me and like spark me into a writing flow that feels good. And so there are a couple of friends that like I'll try to schedule like routine conversations with, like that we'll sit down and we'll talk and then go off and write and come back together. And I do writing workshops as well in that format where like we talk, we get the ideas flowing, we go off, we sort of like stop abruptly, we go off and write and we come back together. And that process has been nice for me. But yeah, but it's like, it's life, it's our passions, and it's whatever wants to happen through us. I say to people a lot of times, I'm much less interested in what you want to create than what wants to happen through you. I think that's a helpful reframe of helping the artist come out.
Yeah, I think what you said a little earlier on when you were talking about, most of the time I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm not sure. I don't know what's coming next, and I'm not, kind of grappling in the dark. And I thought that was really cool to for any students that have joined us now, to hear that, and or just people that are just starting out in their careers to hear that you don't have to have it sussed out. You don't have to know what you don't have to have a plan necessarily. So I thought that was brave of you to say that, and quite cool that that's the way that you think about your career, in inverted commas, whatever that is.
I think it's really important because also with so many of these presentations, it'll look like I did this and then I did that and then I did this and that's how I got. And like I honestly know very few people who like actually went about it that way, as opposed to, I think this might be an opportunity I should do. I think I want to try that. Oh, that didn't work at all. That felt really bad. No more of that. Like, and then looking back, you can see and draw a line, but in it is just a confusing mess of, what do I do? And I think intuition is an incredible guide. Like the body is an incredible guide, and like our passions and what feels right is an incredible guide. And so that's been my, it's been my experience. I think that is a really important message for anybody starting out and feeling overwhelmed at, especially in the world of social media. Why is everybody so successful? Everybody's getting their likes and I'm not getting my likes. Everybody's succeeding and winning and I'm not. No, it's not true. Everybody's figuring it out.
Yeah, no one knows what they're doing, really, I guess. All right, so there's a question from AHSS Events, which I think might be Matt behind that.
Yeah, it's Matt.
That was a good guess, wasn't it? So he's saying, thanks for a great talk, Max. I watched The Social Dilemma and really enjoyed it. Was a real eye-opener. I'm now more conscious of the time I spend on social media, especially with friends and family. As a startup owner, my screen time does sometimes worry me, however. It's hard to imagine accessing my target audiences as easily without using social media.
I mean, it's an incredible marketing machine. Like that's why it works as well as it does. It's really impressive for that. And also like if it's working for you, do you, man. Like if you're like helping promote and bring the things that you care about into the world, and social media is a vehicle for that and a tool for it, and you are doing that, like I'm not here to tell you otherwise. Like awesome. Like keep at it. Yeah, I just, in terms of it is, I remember from when I was working in social media, it was really hard to find life balance because I go on to check work, and then I wake up 30 minutes later in a daze because work is right next to the feed and I'm stuck in and lost. And there are like on Facebook, there's something called Newsfeed Eradicator that like gets rid of the newsfeed and makes that a little bit easier. I don't think there's a version of that for Instagram. I certainly like, even with Instagram Messenger for me, it's like if I'm messaging with somebody, then it's very hard for me to just go check the message and then just leave. I just don't, it's right there. And then all of it, like it's right there. I often fall into that hole.
Yeah,
and so I think that is the challenge.
I find it really hard to sort of draw the line so you can't see my face. There we are. I'm wearing my my clothing startup t-shirt here. I don't know if you can see it.
There you go.
But yeah, it's really hard to draw the line between personal life and business when it's all on the same device. So I've thought about trying to get a separate mobile for my business. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear you talk, and it's a problem I want to sort of solve, and I'm not sure how, as social media has such a monopoly over marketing to customers. So
that would be an interesting strategy, a separate mobile. Obviously, it's an expensive one that not everybody can necessarily afford. But I think that would be interesting. And, it's a lot, especially with the work with kids, the addiction lens is really relevant. And, if for an alcoholic, if you had to go to work in the bar and like talk to your only place your friends existed to you during a pandemic was in the bar, and there was somebody updating the bar every day to be more personally engaging for you, and you carried the bar with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like that's really a recipe for disaster with an addictive device. And so I think it's really hard. It's a really hard thing and takes constant conversation. A lot of like conversations with friends, setting expectations. Hey, like there are going to be times when I'm not going to respond to you right away. I don't like being just like attached and tied to my phone just because it comes up on like there's lots of ongoing conversations that are required to feeling good about it.
Yeah, amazing. But yeah, thanks again for your talk. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Something else occurred to me as well is that I'm just wondering about creating content, which I think most of the community here do, that is going to be consumed on screens in some way. Not all, but mostly, a lot, not mostly, a lot. And we're facing a situation where screens will grab your attention, and that's the aim, but not for long. So it's really interesting how the screen wants our attention, but delivers us content that's bite-sized, tiny. And I wondered if that has an influence on the way that you or one of the reasons that you're co-opting that bite-size attitude towards your art, because it works, because it does, like you said, it'll land. If it's 2 minutes long and it's snappy and fun, it'll land and you can deliver a really strong message. But what happens to longer, languorous, more contemplative work then?
Sure. So it's funny because when I was working in social media, that was certainly the advice that I'd give to brands. It's like, you got to be short. The first 3 seconds have to grit. Like, they're all the tactics and tricks. And then I found with my films, with my art, I couldn't. I couldn't do it. Like, I was like, no, like, I'm not gonna just morph this. It's like I couldn't in my heart, like, just do the things that I know work better. And that was my, and everyone has to find their own balance with how much of that they want to do. I do also believe with because everything is so bite-sized, I think there does start to be demand for like the alternative. Like, there becomes overload for everything is like 3 seconds. People in some ways, I think, are craving more in-depth work and more in-depth storytelling. And we start, like, because we're so caught in the, well, this is working. We see the millions and millions of views. We see the people who are seemingly being so successful on here. It's so easy to compare ourselves. Like, it's never been easier to just, like, the self-comparison machine of social media is always on and always going. And so, like, it's really helpful as well to just separate our measures of success from, did this, like, because as someone who has videos with millions of views, if I have 1 million, I want 2 million. If I have 2 million, I want 10 million. It never ends. It's a treadmill that just never ends. And so really helpful, I think, to think, like, what does it mean to be seen by millions of times? And people go like, oh, like, okay, as opposed to one person being like, oh, like this, wow, like this moved me, or like this is exactly what I needed. Like, that, I could argue, it's like more fulfilling and more powerful. And so I think changing our measures of success from what works to being about what's viewed, as opposed to how we're actually influencing people in their lives, hard, take constant reminding. But I also think really important to feeling fulfilled as artists, because it's so easy. And I certainly have myself to get caught in the treadmill.
Thank you for that. So we're kind of getting to the last few minutes. So anyone who's still nervously not put something in the chat that would like to ask a question, please take your chance to do so. Got something from, I thought it was more of a comment than a question, but it might just spark something in you.
Sure.
From Sophia. It's more of a thought than a question. There you go. As a visual storyteller, when representing a current realistic world, I'm faced with the fact that a big part of the interactions between people now take place on your phone and in writing. I guess she means texting, I suppose. So no one writes anymore. We should start letting anyway. Which makes for a very unsatisfying representations of exchanges between characters, and not showing it all feels like a false representation of the world.
Oh, what a sad, what a sad comment. And that makes sense. Of just, it in that video you saw with all the effects coming on as we walk down the street, the initial plan was just like have people looking down at their phones when they're walking up the street, and people with their heads up, and me with my head up as I'm walking upstream. But we found walking, like, people just looking at their phones didn't look like a statement. That's just how people walk. And so it didn't feel like it was making the point. And it was like a similar sort of realization there. And that is interesting in how the world has just like changed, and so much is happening over text, and not showing it changes that. It's almost like you need a blackout. You need like a lightning strike in the beginning of every story to to make it happen, which is also not realistic. Wow, I hadn't thought about it that way, and that is sad. It's like, it's hard to have these conversations over text, and like to show visually over text and dialogue. And yeah, maybe the characters themselves need to need to establish that they're rebellious and that they hate social media or hate their phones in the beginning of all stories, which I'm okay with personally as a biased individual. But that's hard. Thanks for sharing that, Sophia.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And then Michael is asking, what do you see social media in the future doing for elderly people who struggle with the technology?
I mean, it seems like grandmas seem to love Facebook, as this way of seeing their kids' lives and how wonderful in a certain extent. It also seems like older folks are even more prone to the misinformation streams, and they're incredible programs like people like lonely older people who teach like the language that they speak to people trying to learn that language, and uh, they get to find community and connection that way. Social media in the future doing for elderly people who struggle with the technology. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll continue to do that. I imagine as a whole, we'll all get more and more comfortable with it over time. I certainly am the tech help in my family for my parents. I imagine a lot of you are that as well, but I imagine it'll continue down that road.
Yeah, I definitely find that I end conversations with my mum by saying, thank you for calling technical support. And, my mum's 79, and she rings me up and says, did you see what so-and-so wrote on Facebook? I'm like, no, Mum, I'm working actually. So, the addiction to social media is already in that demographic. Maybe some of, more elderly people that, but some people just don't want to engage with it, and that's their choice. So I just wanted to finish off, Max, by asking you, what's next? What's next for you? I mean, not next for the world. Too big of a question.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be finishing up this digital adaptation of the live show. It's just straight out of my heart. I hope that this begins, and like for the first time in my life, I've talked about being like, I don't know what's happening. I'm hoping that there can be structure of like, I put together the live shows, I do the live shows, then I turn the live show into a digital thing and put the digital thing out where people can see it. Like that as a flow for me would feel really good. And I'm hoping this is a beginning of that. I've often like, as the videos have done really well, it feels like, oh, it's exciting. And now it's like, it doesn't feel like it goes anywhere or really has built so much. And it has in pieces, but like, I don't have a good, like artistic funnel of sorts, and the business art stuff mixing makes me uncomfortable in its own way, but I'm hoping that this is the beginning of that for me. And then, yeah, continuing to give these presentations to students about social media, mostly like high schoolers and middle schoolers, and their parents and their teachers, and developing resources for them, creating workshops, thought starters, conversation starters about how to deal with this stuff. And I hope if things go well, I can continue doing that as my work process for a while. But it's very possible that in 5 years, it's another one of the looking back, oh, and then this happened and that changed everything. The workshops actually have been really fulfilling as well. And if any of you are interested, I can put a link in the chat is there for those as well, which has been fulfilling and fun, and starting to build that out. But I think that's my future. That's where I'm going.
It sounds exciting, and I'm sure you they say if you want to give God a good laugh, tell him what your future plans are. So I'm quite sure
I would love to.
it won't be what we expect, but I think we'll end it there. Thank you everybody who came to join us this afternoon. It's just been an absolute pleasure and privilege to talk to you, Max, and I hope that we can manage to twist your arm in the future to come back and do something else with us too.
Thanks for having me. I would love that. And nice to meet you all.